Hello guys, so in this video we're going to go ahead and look at the activity for week 1 for the review and exercise. Calculate the payment of a loan with a PMT function, right? So more than anything else, this is just to go over more or less how to do these and how I expect them to be just turned in. And honestly, this is rather straightforward, but nonetheless, how the school sometimes gives you the classes isn't always straightforward. Meaning that you might have had Excel 1 a few months back, and right now all of this might seem fairly alien to you, or you might have had a teacher that did things differently. So we're just going to go over this for your benefit in terms of like how to work with it and how to submit it. Okay. For the most part, if I feel that the instructions on the exercise sheet are not 100% clear, I will do other videos guiding you as to how to do them. This one is fairly straightforward. It's just inputting the function and then the values that are being given to you. So in this instance, we are using a PMT function, and let me just zoom in so you can see a little bit better. And for example, if you have bad eyesight like I do, you can zoom into your Excel by holding down the control key and then moving with the mouse cursor. And that is going to increase or decrease the sizing of your work area. Or you can just like drag it down here, and that will go ahead and do the exact same effect, right? So in this is, I'm just going to blow it up as big as possible so that way we can see it. So the first thing I want to go ahead and do in here is just, in this instance, we can just use the first row in here. The first cell. So we're just going to go ahead and do equals PMT and then open up the parentheses. Now in here you can see that Excel, and I don't know if you can actually see it on the screen, but Excel does give you like the rate and then like the variables that it is requesting from this function, okay? So before we start inputting things in here, let's just understand what these values are. And in here in the exercise, we can actually see, what they basically mean. So the rate is the rate in terms of how much we are, the rate of our loan, right? And they give you a very good explanation here. And they tell you that this rate is tied to the amount of, well, if this rate is yearly or monthly, daily, however, the terms are, that is going to be tied to the NPER, which is also going to be reflected in either that time period. And in here they gave you a pretty good example of how to do it, right? So if you want to have a return a monthly payment, this argument needs to be in months. For example, 360 months for a 30-year term, right? So if you're doing monthly payments and the term is 30 years, you would have 360 months, which that is kind of crazy, but seeing how the housing market is nowadays, unfortunately, it's kind of true. Then we have the FEV and type. These are optional. And then here, if we do not put any values, they will automatically be giving zeros as the default values, right? So down we'll go here. We are borrowing 200K for 30 years at 4%, right? And as you can see, again, this one is fairly straightforward. They are giving us how to input the exact value in here. So we're just going to go ahead and do the exact same thing over here. So I will do 0.4. I'm sorry, 0.04. Now, the reason for this is because we are using a a percentage, right? 100% in Excel is represented by a 1. And going down any percentage that is not 100% would be point something. So if I were to do, for example, let's say I wasn't paying attention and I did 0.4, I am not doing a 4% interest rate. I am doing a 40% interest rate, right? So you got to be careful with that. Again, if you were doing 100%, it would just be 1. Anything below 100% would be 0 point and then whatever. So if we are doing 4%, we would do 0.4, okay? And then we're going to go ahead and divide that by 12, comma, and then 30 multiplied by the amount, which is, 30 times 12, comma, and then 200K, right? And we'll set that up and hit enter, right? And that is the amount that we would be looking at paying every month, right? And in here we have a better explanation of this. Let me just expand this a little bit. So where the percentage and the months is the annual interest rate divided by 12, so that it is expressed in a monthly rate. 30 times 12 is the number of periods, so 30 years times, the amount of months, and then the amount in it of itself, right? And in here they kind of show you more or less how it's kind of like spread out. Now, in this particular instance, they are kind of like just doing the values, and we can go ahead and do this as well. Now, the way we do this, and let me just go ahead and get rid of this. So we're going to go ahead and expand this just a little bit. So for example, in here, if I want to adjust, I can double click here, and that is going to adjust my column. Term years, amount, and then down here we can just say monthly payment, right? So in here we're going to go ahead and specify 4, and then we're going to do 30, and then in here we're going to do the dollar amount. Again, I'll adjust that. So first thing we need to do is convert this. So we can select it, and we have a couple of ways to do this, right? So you can right click and then format cell. And then we can go into percentage, right? So in this instance, you can see that it is going at 400%, because again, Excel treats these as percent values. So if I wanted to just do it that way, I could just go ahead and do it as follows, right? So 0.04, which is the actual value. And now if I go to format cell and I select percentage, you can see it's actually doing the 4%, right? And again, I don't think you can actually see the value, but if I click OK, it automatically transforms into 4%. Now, the amount of decimals honestly doesn't really matter all that much. Now, in terms of the formula in here, again, we will do equals PMT, and then open up parentheses, and then we can go ahead and start selecting these, right? So this is going to be the first value, and then divide that by this. And let me just move over here so I can make sure I am inputting the correct things. We're going to separate it by a comma, 30. I'm sorry. See, the importance of paying attention. So we're going to divide that by 12, and then we're going to go ahead and select the term, which is 30, and then multiply that by the amount of the loan itself. Close it off. And too few arguments in the formula. Oh, you know what? Again, I am not paying attention to what I'm doing. There we go. And again, we get the exact same result. But in this instance, we are putting in the values in this way. So if I were to change, for example, this, to say, for example, 5% rate. Now this actually gives us a more usable experience, right? So for example, let's say you get a 3%, and then terms is, let's try 25. You can actually start playing with this, and it'll actually give you the results, right? So at the end of the day, this is what you would go ahead and submit, right? So the first way we did it, where we just did this act doesn't really mean anything. So that is basically all you need to do, right? And here they show you how you would go ahead and select it. So once you are done with this, obviously just let's turn this back over to how it's supposed to be. You would just go over to File, Save As. Now, in terms of the naming of the files, I am not too peculiar about it. So for example, I would suggest create a folder where you're going to be saving things. And then for example, you could just call this, PMT and save it like that. Now that is saved, and then just go ahead and submit it here, right? And that would be basically it. You don't really need to do anything beyond that. Again, this one is fairly simple, fairly straightforward. But again, I just felt this, since it is, the first day of class, it kind of warranted a little bit of like this extra, attention to you guys. And if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. All right.